Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Nice one. Thank you, Jim. Hello, this is David Eastaugh. This is the C86 show. And sometimes, or mostly, I do a show, a radio show. But I've been going through my archives and finding old interviews with various people that I probably put out on various shows over the years. But I thought I should archive them. You get to that age in life. And this is one I did with the filmmaker Lucy Dawkins, who had done one on Sarah Records. It was titled My Secret World. Check it out. It might just change your life. Sarah Records, obviously the independent record label based in Bristol and started by Claire and Matt. Anyway, this is the interview with Lucy. That's the main thing. And yes, it's unedited, so there's probably lots of little glitches. But who cares? Just enjoy it and then go and watch the film. Thank you, Lucy. Take it away.
Right, this is great. Oh, look, Lucy, thank you ever so much for talking to me, because this is about the release of the film, about the wonderful Sarah Records. That was this independent record label that was from Bristol from the late 80s to the mid 90s, wasn't it? So look, how did this film, because somebody who grew up being obsessed with indie pop from the good old days of probably 83 onwards, how did this film sort of come to fruition?
Well, I was a fan of Sarah Records at the time. I discovered Sarah Records through Matt's Sha-La-La flexi discs, and then when Sarah started, I naturally gravitated onto buying the Sarah releases. So, and I was also living in Bristol at the time when I approached Claire and Matt to make the documentary. Sorry, I can hear a bit of an echo on here.
Right.
It's a bit distracting. So, I approached Claire and Matt with my idea just because I was kind of living in Bristol, and Sarah Records wasn't very well known in the city at all. And I just felt it was time that someone revisited the label.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, for those, I just realised, for those who haven't come across their records, can you just give us an idea of what it is, or was, should I say, and, the importance in musical culture?
Ooh, let me have a quick think about that. Well, I think Sarah Records released a really unique style of music. I suppose you'd say it was kind of in the jangly indie vein of music that was around in the early and mid 80s, early
That's right.
90s. They tended to have a sort of jangly, pop-orientated approach to writing songs, a lot of the artists on the label, quite often with quite heartfelt lyrics.
Yeah.
I guess you could sum it up as.
Yeah.
But it was essentially pop music, and disposable throwaway pop music was what Matt Haynes, one of the label founders, always used to like to refer to it as.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, it was founded by Claire and Matt. In the sort of, I suppose it was towards the late 80s, wasn't it?
It was the
80s.
label ran from 1987 to 1995, so 8 years of operation.
And obviously, for those who sort of might have come across it or not, the NME had brought out the year before the C86 cassette, which had 22 tracks. That also had a very sort of indie pop quality. Like the production wasn't huge, and the sort of some of the musical ability was sort of slightly hit and miss, but it was fun and everyone loved it. And frankly, I thought it was fantastic at the time and still do. And sort of Sarah Records sort of took that baton almost, didn't it? They came after that period.
Yeah, I mean, they were very much influenced by the punk do-it-yourself attitude to making music. You didn't have to have any money, you didn't have to even be able to play your instruments particularly well. I know Claire, one of the founders, liked to say you just needed to have you needed to know three chords, and then off you went. So, yeah, it was that approach of just going for it, and it was more about attitude and desire to just create something more than like ability or having lots of money behind you.
Absolutely. Because I think one of the things that came over, and I remember the reason I sort of came across Sarah Records so much was obviously as everyone's going to say, is the John Peel show. He played quite a lot of the material from it, didn't he? And that's where I came across things like the Field Mice, the Orchids, and also a band that I absolutely loved at the time, which was the Hit Parade, and I still do. So they were musicians or bands who seemed to me to have a certain outsider quality without actually looking like they wanted to start a fight, I suppose. They sort of were quite happy, sort of being just like doodling away on their guitars, writing poetical kind of songs, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the interesting things that I discovered during the making of the documentary was that one of the questions I asked members of the band's former artists of the Sarah label was, do you feel like being on Sarah held you back? And the general answer was no, because none of them were doing it to be successful. None of them wanted to sell, thousands of records and get on top of the pops. They just wanted to do what they did, and they considered the fact that Claire and Matt released their records and gave them that chance was just fantastic, and they were happy with that. But then saying that, the Hit Parade were actually really, really popular in Japan and were signed to a major out there. So the Hit Parade were the one band on sale, I think, that were very, very successful, but albeit not in the UK.
Yeah, and that featured the one and only Julian Henry, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And again, because all by theirs was a song which John Peel played. And I remember it was actually because he also had a World Service song called "I'll See You in Nirvana."
Yeah.
And it was just
Havana, wasn't it?
Havana, that's the one. And again, it was one of those kind of, it was very, I suppose you would call it slightly, it was very sensitive, and it was very, I suppose you could say, is it fey would be the right word to describe things like the Hit Parade? It was very sort of, it was quite a delicate and soft quality.
Yeah.
Which obviously there was a market for people like that music from people like me, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that was another thing that I have discovered during the making of the documentary was how much more feeling, how attached to the label so many people are now. I mean, that was quite a delightful thing during the course of making My Secret World was the number of fans that got in touch and just were so overjoyed that I was making this documentary because Sarah Records meant so much to them at the time, and it still means a lot to people now. And I think that's really quite unusual for a tiny record label that nobody's heard of,
Yes.
It obviously really struck a chord with people. And like I say, Sarah Records are even more popular now than I think they were at the time, because so many young people who weren't even born when Sarah was in existence have discovered the label over recent years. And, like I say, Sarah Records is even more popular than ever.
Well, I think the interesting thing with these kind of occasions is there's a sort of nostalgia, which can be both good and bad, because sometimes it puts stuff into a sort of a category of sort of a museum, which I don't think is always good. And you put it behind a glass cabinet and look at it and sort of occasionally go, oh, that was very nice, and reminisce. But I think there's the other thing that actually you start to get to a point where you would quite like to hear some of the music again. And if you had a flexi disc or you had an old cassette that of just a few songs, you start to look via the internet of whether you can just go and buy the album now on a CD or MP3. And I think that's when people start saying, well, where did that all go? And I suppose people who've got the master copies could say, well, actually, we could just put this out. And some of it can sound magical, and some of it can just be like, well, that was interesting in a nice way.
Yeah, I mean, I never set out to be nostalgic in the making of the documentary. Like you say, why did I want to make the documentary? One of the reasons was I think the music Sarah released never reached a wide enough audience at the time. So I'm hoping that through making My Secret World, more people are aware of the music they released. And also, I think so much of the music really has stood the test of time, so much of the music sounds incredibly fresh. Orchids, the Field Mice, Blue Boy, even as we speak. I mean, I could go on and list every single artist on the label. It still sounds incredibly accomplished and fresh.
And what, did you manage to track down most of the people from these bands, that you mentioned?
Yeah, I did. I through social media, it's quite easy to sort of track anyone down these days, I think.
Yeah.
And the majority of people that I approached were very, very happy to be interviewed and were really helped and contribute to the making of the documentary.
Fantastic. Did you find that they were also, had they stayed in music and continued, or was it a case that they just felt that they had their sort of, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years doing it and then sort of moved on, or what happened to most of these characters?
It's a real split, actually. Some people have carried on recording. Bobby Ratton from the Field Mice, for example, still records, and then the other members of the Field Mice, for example, Anne-Marie and Michael, they're doing completely different jobs. I think they're working in finance, so there's a real split there. I know quite a lot of the artists still make music as a hobby. I can't think of anyone that's actually, apart from Bobby, I can't think of anyone that's doing it sort of full time.
No, because I sort of having sort of also been curious with the other sort of indie bands and labels from that 80s period, it's been quite interesting that a lot, had their feel and realised that they'd had enough and probably didn't have much more creativity to do, so they've sort of gone off, but then they've sort of reformed recently. And I don't think personally it's about the money, because they didn't make any probably then, and they're definitely not going to make any now. But I think sometimes it's that moment where probably people in their 50s or late 40s are just thinking, actually it'd be quite nice to have a little go again and just kind of play some of those songs.
Yeah, I mean, Secret Shine have carried on going, and the Orchids still play, but they've all got full-time jobs and do other things, so they've carried on those bands. Just because they obviously enjoy playing and it's a big part of their lives. But I think a lot of the people on Sarah kind of realised that the music industry possibly wasn't for them.
Yeah.
I think they realised that it's possibly not a fantastic environment unless you're a certain kind of person. So I think rather than running out of creativity, they purposely thought, this isn't for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, look, the DVD has come out, hasn't it?
The DVD is just about to come out. This whole production's been very DIY. I've been very inspired by the spirit of Sarah, I guess you could say. So I funded the whole documentary myself. It's being independently distributed by myself. I've actually been lucky enough that Rough Trade want to help distribute this special edition of the DVD.
Yeah.
And this special edition of the DVD is going to be out, I'm going to stick my neck out and say November the 1st.
Fantastic.
Even though I still have a few things to put in place.
Yeah.
And it's going to contain 85 minutes of extra content, a fold-out poster, a zine, and a set of postcards. So I'm presenting it very much in the same way that Claire and Matt used to present their releases, with a lot of love and attention.
Fantastic. And now, for those who want to get a copy, especially as Christmas is around the corner,
Yeah.
how do people, track this down, by the way?
So Rough Trade will be selling it, so on the Rough Trade site, and also I'm going to be selling it, so people can visit my website, storyofsarahrecords.com.
Yeah.
And also I'm on Twitter.
Yeah.
I think I'm at SarahRecordsDoc, and I'm on Facebook.
Brilliant.
So if you do a search for My Secret World, the story of Sarah Records, you'll find all the details of how to get hold of a copy.
Amazing. Yes, and it's like I said, yes, www.storyofsarahrecords.com, My Secret World, the DVD. Look, Lucy, thank you ever so much for talking to me. It's
Great,
been amazing. And I'll keep in touch because, I just think what you've done is a fantastic job to keep this going. And
Thanks very much.
really, hats off and all that. But thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the interest.
Yeah, God, no, it's great. It's good stuff. Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Lovely talking to you.
Lucy, sorry. Bye.
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 There you go. I was confused. The recording levels were a bit low. It was all a bit hit and miss, wasn't it? Anyway, that was quite a few years ago. And that was with Lucy Dawkins talking about the film My Secret World, which tells the story of the famous record label Sarah Records. Anyway, this has been David Eastaugh. Do you want my contact details? No, not really. Anyway, have a great week.